meeting you.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie and I'm here today with Elaine Hilides. Elaine has got a background in NLP and TFT and hypnotherapy, and that was prior to becoming a Three Principles coach. And she also is a Udemy instructor. So hello, Elaine.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So before you got into the coaching side of things with NLP and hypnotherapy, what were you doing before then? What led you into the coaching field?
Well, I did a Paul McKenna. It was an NLP course way back in God knows, I can't even remember when. And the instructors were Richard Bandler, Paul McKenna, and Michael Neal. And I did the practitioner, and then I did the master prac, and then I went on to work with Paul McKenna on his I Can Make You Thin days. And so I used to see clients, you know, I used to dabble and have a few clients. I was working full time. And then in 2008, I got cancer, and yeah, that was fine. But in 2009, I felt like I wanted to change things up, you know, the way you do. And so I hired Jamie Smart as my coach. I was his apprentice for a year in 2009. And the reason I had gone to Jamie was because when I was doing the NLP with Paul McKenna, etc., they never advertised anyone else's things. It was all very just, you could buy all their books and all their videos, etc., but only theirs. But there were some cards from Jamie Smart. They were little packs of cards for different things, you know, for, I can't even remember what they were for now. So his name had stuck in my mind, and I'd started to read his newsletters and that kind of thing. And then I decided I wanted to be a better coach. I wanted to really, you know, crack NLP and be great. So I hired him. I was his apprentice. Huge amount of money. I actually remortgaged my home to do this, to get the money, because I just, you know, felt it was the right thing. And I thought I was going to be a better NLP coach. But at the same time, so when I hired Jamie in March 2009, he had hired Michael Neal as his coach. So he became Michael's apprentice. And of course, Michael by then had switched over to the principles. He wasn't doing any NLP. So Jamie was getting all this NLP stuff from Michael and then passing it on to me. So I was incredibly lucky to be right at the forefront of you know, the principles in the UK. So that's how I came to be. So I did many years of working with the principles and studying, but then whilst I was studying in 2010, I decided to become a full-time coach, and forgot, you know, didn't touch any of the NLP or the TFT and any of the other things.
So when you came across the Three Principles, did it impact your life in any way? Did it change things for you?
It did. It was, as everybody says, it was one of those things that it's more like recognizing something, isn't it, when you come across it? It's like recognizing that feeling of as Dickens would say, coming home. It just felt right. But as everybody else says, it just seemed to be too simple. So I remember in 2009, and it was about August, I think it was August, maybe September, Jamie said, you must come over to this place and listen to these people. And I said, yeah, of course, off I went. And it was a place called Tikkun in Finchley, and it was the Jewish centre, yeah. And I had a day with a few others that Jamie worked with, a few people in his office, and we had a day with Terry Rubenstein and Rabbi Shal Rosenblatt, which was wonderful. And I, you know, really came away from that day thinking, you know, oh my God, this is amazing. And then about a week later, he said, you must come over and meet this guy who's over. And he's really, so again, yes, off I went. So off I went back to Tikkun and had a day with George Pransky. Again, there were only about 6 of us. And I remember saying to George Pransky back when we went out for lunch, the few of us, and he was talking about working with the principals with rape victims. And I can remember saying, don't be silly. You can't work with rape victims and the principals. You can't tell rape victims it's their thinking, you know. And he was very kind to me and explained how. So I was still, you know, in the beginning, knew this thing could be the answer to everything, but it just seemed to be too simple. You know, where I was like, I was used to all these techniques and these tools and lots of doing. So yeah, so that was quite funny. So yes, it did impact me, and I knew very, very soon into it that I didn't want to work with any other modality. There was no point to working with anything else.
Before I started speaking to you today, I did see you on YouTube talking about the placebo effect. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, I love the placebo effect. I mean, actually, I spoke in Helsinki at the first Unlimited, it was called an Unlimited conference with Dickon and Jamie and a few others. And the subject of my talk was something like, is health, physical health, an inside out job? And so I talked about the placebo effect quite a lot with that as well. Now, you know, we know that mind and body is one system, but we also know that mind, the brain is mind's pharmacy. And so, you know, I find it amazing when you read all these reports about people that have had, you know, half the group have a placebo pill for depression and half have the standard pill for depression. And the results are virtually the same, because it's been proven that when you think you're going to get these chemicals, your brain activates the chemicals. It creates the chemicals that you think you're going to have. So, you know, thought has an absolute impact on the chemicals that brain releases. And I find that fascinating. I mean, there are so many placebo reports, aren't there? There was one with a group of people who had a chemotherapy pill, who had cancer, and they had a chemotherapy pill. So they were divided, and obviously they were monitored very closely by the hospitals, and they were divided. And 95% of the whole group, that's the half that had the placebo and the half that didn't, lost their hair. But they hadn't had the tablet. So I find, yeah, the placebo effect fascinating. I think that it's easy to forget the influence we have on our own bodies.
Yes, it is. Have you had any experience yourself with your health and how you've maybe managed to overcome it using the 3 principles? Or,
well, I can't say overcome it really. As I say, I had cancer in 2008, and I because I had all these NLP techniques, and I thought, right, this is a time to really step up and walk your talk. And so I really did work on thinking I was well. I did the meditations, I did the visualizations, I imagined, that I was getting rid of the cancer. I did a lot of things. Yeah. And I have to say, I didn't feel desperately impacted by having cancer. I mean, it was more of a nuisance than anything else, especially like 6 weeks of daily treatment. It gets very boring, but I didn't suffer with it, and I felt like I got through this really well. But it wasn't until coming across the principles that I realised all the doing I'd been doing, and I realised that once I came across the principles, I was able to just be well, whatever was going on. And so I didn't ever fear that it was going to come back. I didn't really think about it. And then actually last year I got it again. And then, I think I was incredibly blessed. I had 13 years of not having it. So it was, when it came back, it was small, it was dealt with, it was fine. I had more operations and whatever. And this time I was not impacted by it either. It really wasn't a thing. And actually not long afterwards, when people asked me how my recovery was going, I had to really stop and think, what recovery? What? What are they talking about? Because it really didn't matter, if you see what I mean. But this time around was very different, because this time around I could just kind of settle into it. I don't fear cancer. I mean, the cancer cells were still in my body. It was still me. And something that was very clear to me this time around is, you know, I don't want it back again. Of course I don't want it back again. And I'd really rather they didn't keep cutting bits off of me. But if they, whatever they do to my body doesn't impact me. It doesn't impact myself. There's nothing in myself that can be harmed by anything they do on the outside to my body. And that was incredibly reassuring. So not exactly the placebo, but I didn't ever feel ill. My recovery was a breeze. And I really do put that down to having peace of mind, whatever's going on.
You do seem like a very positive person, and
You should talk to my family.
It just struck me when you were talking about people were thinking you were ill, but you weren't thinking of yourself as ill. That other people were sort of putting that on you almost, and that was their thoughts around it. Thoughts around it. Absolutely.
And there's an awful lot of innocently, people will be quite upset with you that you're not suffering. Because you should be. You've got cancer, you know, you should be. And of course, you only have cancer for a while until they cut it out, don't you? And as far as I'm concerned, it's gone. It's, you know, I consider I'm cancer free. So it is surprising people's reaction. The very first time I had it, I was working in a university and I was trying to collate exam board marks, and one of the senior members of staff, I'm not sure if he's a doctor or professor, I can't remember now, and he said to me, oh, you know, so where are we going on holiday? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you must be going on holiday if you're trying to get the marks in now. You're not, you know, you're not going to be there. And I said, no, I've got cancer, I'm having an operation. And actually the staff asked me if I would break it more gently to other people. Which I did find quite amusing, because they couldn't cope. They couldn't cope with my prognosis, or not my prognosis, my diagnosis.
It just strikes me that it's like you're the one who's got the cancer, but you have to break it to the people who are perfect.
I know. It's so funny. It is so funny. Yes. Yeah. And you know, I think people think that you must be denying it or repressing it if you're not kind of bothered. And I truly wasn't. You know, I truly wasn't. And I say to people, never once did I the first time around, and certainly not this time around, ever say anything like I'm a cancer survivor. I wasn't a cancer sufferer. I just had cancer, you know, and I'm not a cancer survivor, you know. And I often say to people, I've had flu. I don't say I'm a flu survivor, you know. So yeah, it is surprising. So it's not exactly a placebo effect, because, you know, I had the thing. But I do think still, I'm such a great believer in the power of mind. You know, as we always say, you think it, you feel it. And it's not that I was doing my best not to think about it. I just didn't really think about it. You know, even going in for the, you know, I was told twice by different sonographers doing radiotherapy, doing the ultrasounds rather, in different hospitals. Twice they put down their, you know, the thing that they move around over you, and said to me, you're just too calm. And I was like, well, what are you going to be doing to me? As far as I was concerned, this is, you know, pain-free. And going into the operation this time, you know, you walk in, and I was surrounded in this big, they call it a bear hug thing that keeps you warm. And you know, I met the anaesthetist earlier, and then he said something, it was just before Christmas, and I said something about being plant-based, and we talk about Christmas lunch. And he said, oh, I'm flirting with being vegan. So we were having this lovely chat about food. And then he said, oh, I'm going to give you something to make you even more relaxed. And I laughed. And he said, well, look at your blood pressure, not your blood pressure, your heart rate. He said, you're already so relaxed. And I think that surprised them, that I was just about to get on the operating table, and I've kind of forgotten. I was having such a nice chat.
I'm just curious, you said you're plant-based, so you're pure vegan, are you now?
Yes, yeah, I am. And I have been for quite a few years. And, you know, it's a choice, it's a personal choice. I mean, I think it definitely helped me this time around. As I say, my cancer was very small and it was very manageable. but it's a personal choice. You know, I never would push that on people. I worked on an awful lot with weight loss years ago, and I brought out, I think it was the first book, according to Jack Pransky, it was the first book about weight issues from a principal's perspective. And you know, it's an area I'm fascinated in, weight loss, and because it's never about the food on your plate, it's about what you think about the food on your plate and that you think about you. It's not on your plate, it's in your head, isn't it? And when I first used to do a lot of research about milk and different things, I did get a bit soapboxy. I was kind of lecturing people why they shouldn't or shouldn't eat certain things, but you know, I'm much more relaxed about it. And that's not my business. It's their business what they eat. So yeah.
I just wondered if going plant-based was a result of your cancer diagnosis, or were you before then?
Well, probably the first time round, to be fair, because the first time around I got an awful lot more interested in food and you know, the results in your body about the food you eat. And I flirted a few times with raw food diets. I have a dehydrator and I go into thinking I'm going to be raw food, and you know, sometimes I've got it about 100%, but not often. And it's something I just dip in and out of now. I don't have many raw food days, but I think that started it, because obviously if you're going to look at raw food, then you're not going to have meat or fish because you don't want that raw. So that kind of got me into more plant-based. Yeah. So it's a gradual process, bit by bit. And as I said, I did an awful lot of research for the book. So the book I had out, I think I brought it out in, I think it was January 2013, just as a Kindle book. And it has kind of a chapter on food, and then a chapter on principles, on thought, and it you know, goes like that throughout the book.
So is it primarily about nutrition, your book? What's your book called? Do you want to give your book a plug?
It's called Mindfulness, with 2 L's. Mindfulness, because you know, people would come to me with a mind full of diet information, and also a play obviously on mindfulness. So it's called Mindfulness, the No Diet Diet. Yeah.
I like it.
yeah, it appealed to me. Yeah. So I've had I did a lot of work with weight loss. I've also done a lot of work in the addiction field as well, because I find, you know, I find everything fascinating really to do with the mind, but you know, addiction is fascinating too, isn't it? So not just food addiction, you know, obviously drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it would be.
Yes, you can be addicted to anything really, can't you?
Oh, totally. But as we all know, the biggest addiction is to thinking.
Yes, I was one of my previous guests, Peter Mears. He was an addict for years and years and years until he had a suicide attempt and was saved from it. And the 3 principles has totally turned his life around because of them. So
yes, yeah, totally. Well, I think when you realize that it's like any, you know, food, anything, if you think that a thing is going to give you a feeling, then obviously you're going to look for a feeling in the thing, aren't you? But when you realize where the feeling is coming from, and you realize you don't need the thing to change your feeling, then it's revolutionary. It's transformation. Yeah. And I had I started a group in 2012 or 13. It was a group sharing the principles with those in rehab from drugs, alcohol, and mental health issues. And there was a guy there who was like, yeah, I get it. I totally get what you mean. And he said that when he would get the clucking, as he called it, when everything is going, when he desperately needed a fix. And as soon as he met his dealer, as soon as the drugs were in his hand, before he'd even cooked it, all the symptoms disappeared. And he said, I see. And he hadn't made the connection until then. He was like, well, I see, of course, because it wasn't the drug that had made the feeling disappear. Yeah, it was because he had the thought that he had the drug, and he was able to, yeah, have his thing.
It's like a security blanket, isn't it? It's almost like
it is.
It is. A favorite toy that makes you feel safe and
totally. And the irony is that if anyone has a child or is around a child and they have a security blanket, or as you say, a favorite toy, you know, if they can't possibly sleep without this certain toy, as an adult, we indulge it because we know it doesn't really matter. Let them have the blanket. Let's go find the toy, you know. But we don't believe the security comes from it. And yet we do the same things. We think our security comes from so many things on the outside that it can't possibly come from. So we can see it. It's like when you can see it for someone else, isn't it? And you can't see it for yourself.
I'm just thinking about myself. Sometimes if I get really low, it's easy to sort of think, oh, I could do with a glass of wine or some chocolate or something to make myself feel better. And I know full well I don't need it.
Yes.
But it still makes me feel better.
It is. But again, notice when you start to feel better, because you'll feel better as soon as you decide to have it. Not before you've had it, you know, before you've pulled the cork or unscrewed it, you'll feel better. Yeah. You know, it's been proven that dopamine is released at the thought of the thing. So they did this with monkeys and chocolate, and also measured. And when we think about something, dopamine is released, but it isn't released at all when we have the thing. Isn't that amazing?
It is, yes. It is amazing, because you do still think, oh, the wine makes you feel better, but obviously no, it's just the thought of getting the wine, having it in your hand.
Exactly. And you see what happens, as we know, is you've got a head full of thinking about whatever it would be, whatever you think you're worrying about or concerned about, and then you start thinking about the wine or the chocolates, and you feel better immediately. So you think you feel better because of the wine or the chocolates, without realizing you feel better because you've let go of the thinking about whatever it was that you were thinking about. So actually your thoughts have changed, and that's made you feel better, but we don't see that in the moment, do we?
Not at all, no. Has anybody else got any questions they'd like to ask Elaine, or any comments?
That's nice from Melanie. That's nice. Thank you, Melanie. I'm glad you're enjoying listening. I say I can chat forever. So yeah.
I've got my dog is demanding attention at the moment.
Oh, that's nice. Oh.
And she's trying to destroy my mother's cushions, so I'm going to have to pick her up so she doesn't destroy my mother's cushion, otherwise she'll have my bits for garters. Any hints of having a mindful pet to relax?
I know. Well, the funny thing is, though, don't you find even with a pet, the more you quieten down, the more they quieten down? You know, I always remember the very first principals conference in the UK was tiny. It was held at Tikkun, and it was just in, you know, they'd opened up the rooms, but it was still tiny. I think it was probably maybe 100 people. And there was a woman there that was talking about, she had been in prison and had heard Jan and Chip Chipman, and she had been in prison from, I can't remember how many times she'd been incarcerated, both her and her husband. And they were both in separate prisons, obviously. And she had twins and an older boy, I think, and she had a baby daughter. And the judge had said this time they were going to be adopted. And she said that she heard Jan and Chip in prison, and was just, she said she went back to her cell and just cried and cried and cried, but this time not feeling sorry for herself, but there was a glimmer of hope. And she wrote a letter to the judge and explained how she felt. And the judge called her in and said, you know, what's different? I've got a stack of letters from you over the years. What's different? Anyway, long story short, this woman got out of prison, and instead of knowing that she was going to get out and no one was going to employ her, so this was in the States, no one was going to employ her. She had nowhere to live. Her children were, you know, in care or fostered. So what was she going to do? She was going to go back to using. Why wouldn't she? There was nothing else. But this time she knew that when she got out, everything would be different. And it has been for her. It really has been for her. And I remember saying to her, because I was just going to have my first, so this was in 2010, I think, the first conference. And I was just going to have my first session with an addict, with a heroin addict. And I had a Skype with her, and I said, you know, almost like, what do I say? And she said, be quiet with him. she said, sit and be quiet with him, because she said to me, you know, addicts have so much noise in their head that they won't hear you, and you'll just be adding to the noise. So just sit quietly with him for a while. And that's really the best advice anyone can have, isn't it? Whatever is going on for someone else, if you sit quietly with them, you allow them to calm down, don't you?
And it almost feels like such a hard thing to do, to sit quietly, because I think we're all conditioned that, or myself before 3 principles, if there's a silence, you feel like you have to fill the silence of talking.
Yes, absolutely. And also, you know, when I was doing NLP, I used to throw the kitchen sink at everybody, you know, because, and also innocently arrogant, because if they were coming to me, say they were coming to me, they wanted to stop smoking, or they had OCD or something, I would have the session almost completely planned in my head, you know, what I was going to do with them. I hadn't even met them, you know, and as I say, how innocently arrogant was that? You know, I was going to fix them, but I would do everything. I would give them techniques, and I would do a bit of hypnotherapy, and I would just throw so much at them, which now looking back, it's, well, you know, how confusing. But we think if we sit quietly, well, you know, they're paying us money. We can't just sit quietly with them. Strange, isn't it?
It is. I think it was George Pransky I heard say that it's not on us to fix people.
Totally not on us. Totally. I think that's absolutely right. And you know, I've heard people in the past, practitioners, say that they get a little bit urgent if they think the person they're working with doesn't get what they're saying. Well, and for me, I think this is so simple. Of course they're going to get to what I'm talking about. You know, how would they not? Because it's really simple. But also, it's not on me, as you say, it's not on me whether they get it or not. I will do my absolute utmost to share what I've seen. And you know, I want somebody to get the transformation, but it's not up to me. And I think once we realize that, again, we can just do our job and not have to feel that we're trying to do their job as well. We're trying to get it for them, because obviously we can't.
I suppose sometimes, have you ever had the experience where people come to you and they feel like you've got a magic cure for them and they expect you to fix them?
Well, I actually felt that more with hypnotherapy, and that was really the reason I gave up hypnotherapy, because I did have a tiny bit of crossover that I used to still have people come for hypnotherapy, and actually I would give them the principles, and I would kind of tag on a relaxation at the end, and everything in the relaxation was talking about the things that we talked about in the session. But that's why I absolutely had to give up hypnotherapy, because I just felt that people were thinking it was that was going to change things. And you know, it didn't matter how many times I would tell them it was them that was changing things, they still may have felt like that. So I found that more with hypnotherapy, not so much now.
When I was studying NLP and sort of practicing on people, I did feel like I was almost a magician and I had magic powers, which obviously is my ego, but but it did give me that sort of feeling, because I got such good results when it did work. Got such good results. Yes,
yeah. I remember when I was doing the Paul McKenna and Richard Bandler and Michael Neal things, and I would come home and my daughter would say to me, you know, don't NLP me, and I used to say, how do you know I'm not? You know. And she'd go wrong. And I also, when I was doing the hypnotherapy, she would say, I would come in and she would say, don't look at me, as if it was that easy. Yeah.
I've just got that vision. Do you remember the old Little Britain sketch of where they did the hypnosis?
Yes. Yeah.
My eyes.
Yeah.
My eyes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Oh. Yeah. So I don't so much now. I don't know really. I think I've been doing this for so long that it's just kind of such second nature really to work with my clients. And yeah, so I don't ever feel the need to fix them. In fact, somebody said to me recently that one of the reasons that they've really enjoyed working with me is because they know they can't let me down, because I'm not telling them to go and do I'm not telling them to go and do something, you know. I'm just allowing them to get it.
Have to find the solution yourself. You're just the guide to help them find the solution themselves, I guess.
It's just, I'm holding the space for them to find it.
Yeah.
I'm just holding a safe space for them to find it, aren't I? And maybe just gently pointing in a direction. Yeah, which is wonderful. It's wonderful too. For me, when I started in 2009, I would have probably known every principal's practitioner in the UK. If known of them, at least, if I didn't know them personally, because there were so few. And it's wonderful now that it's just exploded. I think in the UK we embraced it far quicker. Or not quickly really, was it? But I remember Coisy, Dickens' wife, saying to me once, she said to me, if you asked anybody in Lacona, in the village, what they did up there in Pranskin Associates, they wouldn't know. She said, but there, it was still so contained. And she was amazed when she came to the first conference. There were so many people.
I'm just going to ask again, just in case anybody else has got any questions.
They can jump in.
Or you can just jump
Hi.
in.
Hi. Hello, Melanie.
Hi. Yes. No, I just thought of something I wanted to share. I'm not sure, if it's relevant, but something Elaine said at the start about she felt it was too simple.
Yes.
The understanding, and I've sort of been in this understanding for, I don't know how many years, probably about 7 years now. And I just feel more and more that the simpler the better.
Oh, totally.
The simpler the better for me. I don't know about other people, but I was actually trying to find a coach recently in the Three Principles. It was before the latest conference, and I was having an issue in a personal relationship, and I was like, oh, I think I'd really benefit from just getting someone else's perspective on this. And for one reason or another, I just couldn't get anything booked. So I attended the conference, and since that time, I've just been kind of thinking, whenever it comes up for me, I've been like, well, I haven't seen the answer yet. So, but there's nothing, I can't produce that answer. So I'm just gonna put it to one side again and
totally,
see what occurs to me. And then the other day, it just out the blue, I had just had this thought, and it was, what if what I'm feeling about this is just not helpful? It was, I know that just sounds like nothing, but for me, it was like it came with flashing light bulbs, because it was just
totally.
If you take it right down to the simplest level.
Yep.
Is this thought and is this feeling helpful?
Yes.
And from that, I sort of went off into a path of, well, if it's not helpful, then how accurate is it? Probably.
Nice. Very nice.
It just was like, that kind of was the answer. It wasn't like some big in-depth explanation or strategy. It was just see when you're feeling like that about that person or that situation, maybe just ask yourself if anything that you're feeling or saying or doing is helpful. And from that as well, I had the other thought was, is it kind? Is it? And it just sort of went from there, and I was like, wow, and so it came back to me that I was quite happy to work with a coach or something on this, but we have the solutions available, and they can be totally simple. And I don't think a coach could have given me that. And probably if they said to me, oh, what if you think to yourself, how helpful is this thought? I'd have been like, oh, that's great. It was, but it came to me, and it is helpful. That is helpful because it came from me and because it was right for me.
Totally.
And I love the simplicity. Like probably when I started, I was like, I didn't get that, but now like the more I still feel like a beginner in this understanding, and I'm just so happy when something happens like that, when I get an insight. Mm-hmm.
Melanie, I feel like a beginner in this too, and I've been in it years. and I love that I feel like a beginner in it. I don't ever want to get, I don't know, what can you say? I want to still be a beginner. I want to see things fresh. Yes. And I love what you said, about looking for a solution, because when you look for a solution, it's like looking for your car keys. They're there, but you just can't see them, because you're looking too hard. Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful.
But I love like that. It felt like somehow I've picked up, must have been more the speakers I've listened to, but just this idea that it's not on me, that it's not, it's such a weight off, it's such a weight off to say, it's not on you. You're not, your little mind can't come up with, it's not anywhere near. It might come up, you might have some experience in the past that could help you, but the chances are that there's something far greater that we have access to, and just if you just trust and you just say, okay, I don't know the answer. And I think I remember George Francie talking about that, going to, or Aaron Turner or somebody talking about going to some big meeting, and they'd hired him, and they were like, okay, we want your input, and he was and then they went on a break, and he had a sort of assistant there with him, or someone he was training, and they said, well, George, what are you gonna tell these people? Like, what do you know what to do? And he said, no. She's like, really? Like, oh my goodness. She said, you don't look worried about that. He's like, I'm not. Because right now, he's like, I can't come up with it.
Yes, exactly.
It'll come to me or it won't, and I'll just be frank with them if it doesn't. So I love that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's lovely what you say too, because we can only have our own insights. So as a coach, I can point people towards a direction. I can ask them to consider where their feelings come from, all those kind of things, but I can't have an insight for them. And it doesn't matter what I say, when they have their own insight about maybe what I've said, that is going to be the thing that helps them, having their own insight, because that's all we can do. We can't let's say, have someone else's insight. Yes, that's good. And when you said as well, something you said, it made me think of people when they have insight envy, when everybody else seems to be getting an insight or seems to be coming up with solutions, and we think, why I'm looking in this direction, why aren't I coming up with things? Yeah, and then we realize that actually we're having insights all the time, but they might be small and quiet rather than big.
Sure.
So that's a brilliant one. And and I think, I know I've said this before with people, but for me and my relationship, I am absolutely positive that much as I love my partner, we probably might not be together if it wasn't for the principles, because I would have, many years ago, I used to think, pre-principles, I used to think my feelings were telling me something. I thought my feelings were giving me information about my life or my decisions. I didn't realize that the only information my feelings can give me is about the kind of thinking I'm in. So I think my partner's gorgeous, but I might wake up in the morning and look at him and think, oh, he's lovely. And then I might wake up the next morning and look at him and think, really? And actually there's nothing to do with him. It's not, but then years ago, I would have thought, oh, why am I feeling like this? Oh, it must be this, or it must be this. And I would have added all the things that I thought could potentially be wrong. And then I would wonder why my feeling was so awful. And I would think, oh, this can't be right. Whereas now I just think, oh, so what? If I have a feeling, I'm a big believer in so what. I feel really crappy today. Oh, so what? Because I think so what is like a full stop. It just stops you adding lots and lots of extra thoughts oh, well, it must be this, and this, and this, and this. It's just like, finished, so what? Move on.
I just had a thought. So just talking about relationships made me have this thought. So do you think there is such a thing as love at first sight with the 3 principles of understanding, or do you think it's just lust? If your thoughts are driving your feelings and you see somebody and you think, gosh, I want to marry them, you've only just seen them, what's that?
Oh, well, that's personal. I mean, to each person. I don't mean it's personal to me. I mean, you know, we have an idea about someone. So yes, there will be a physical attraction because we have an idea about what we think we like or we're attracted, or maybe they're completely different to the way we think that somebody that we're attracted to would be. So it's perfectly possible to have love at first sight. You know, I remember once being in a seminar with Amy Chen Mills, and somebody said, so does this mean if we have this understanding, we could really love anybody? It doesn't matter who we live with, we could just love anybody. And she said, well, yes, but you still have preferences. You know, she said some people like to live in a city and some people like to live in the mountains. You're still allowed preferences. It doesn't mean that, you know, and I think that's it, isn't it? I mean, you could have somebody could think they have love at first sight, and as you say, it's just lust, and fair play to that. But I think one of the things about having this understanding is if somebody met somebody at a party or whatever, and they thought it was love at first sight, and they told everybody they knew that they'd fallen in love with this guy, and this person was perfect for them, and it was just amazing, and blah, 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 blah. And then maybe a week later, they thought, oh, God, I don't know what I was drinking that day, but this person isn't for me. I think having this understanding, we are able to recognize a change of thinking, that the way we think changes our feelings. And so we don't have to be compelled to carry on with something just because we had the feeling. Maybe. You know, I just think it's, you know, we know that we feel love. We feel, you know, you might love your partner, you might love your parents, your children, your best friend, your dog, you know, we feel love. But we don't always feel love. It doesn't matter who they are. We know we love them. But if we're in a feeling of if we're in a not so great thinking about them, like, you know, why did they do this? Or, you know, they thought they were going to do this, or your children have a messy room, whatever it would be. In that moment, we don't feel love, do we? But we know we don't have to do anything about it. We know we don't have to immediately try and divorce the partner or chuck the children out or something, because we still know there's an underlying feeling there when we let go of the thinking we're in.
Yeah, I love that. I can't think of anything else to ask now. I don't know whether Melanie or Lisa have got anything they'd like to say or ask, or whether just to call it a close, or if you've got anything else you'd like to say, Elaine.
You know, as I say, I could go on forever, but just about relationships, I think it's a really interesting. It's really interesting how difficult we can make relationships. You know, relationships are one of those things, when somebody first comes across the principles, let's say, they might say, yes, you know, the principles works in this area and this area, but it doesn't work with relationships, you know, as if the principles are a thing that you know, rather than underpin everything. And I think, as I said, we make relationships much more difficult than we need to. And one of the reasons I think that traditionally we make relationships difficult is because we think someone else should be providing a feeling for us. And then if we start thinking that, you know, it's someone else's job to make us happy, then that's difficult. When we realize that it's up to us, our feeling will come from us, and it's got nothing to do with the other person, then actually we are more able to love unconditionally. And doesn't everybody want to be loved unconditionally? And yet many of us don't love unconditionally because we have all these conditions on the way somebody behaves or the way they talk, you know, so many different conditions. And I think having an understanding means that you really can love unconditionally, because you don't have to take anything that anybody says or does personally. That's another big thing I'm passionate about, is not taking things personally. Yeah.
Just going to read the message.
Yes.
I have loved listening. Thank you for sharing your experience, wisdom, and your time. Very insightful. Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you. It's been lovely.
Fantastic. And I wish you all of you all the best.
Yes, you too. See you soon.
And the sun's out.
Yes. So it's going to, in the UK anyway, it's going to be a heat wave this weekend.
I know. At last. How wonderful.
Yes. May of rain. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.